All right then. Good evening, Nevada. The Senate will come to order. The Secretary will call the roll.
Senator Brooks. Senator Cancella. Senator Canizaro.
Here.
Senator Dennis. Senator Dondero Loop. Senator Gansert. Senator Gokachia. Senator Hammond. Senator Hansen. Senator Hardy. Senator Harris. Senator Kiekhofer. Senator Orangehall. Senator Parks. Senator Pickard. Senator Ratty. Senator Scheibel. Senator Settlemeyer. Senator Washington. Senator Woodhouse. Senator Spearman.
Present.
Thank you. Let the record reflect there are 21 senators present. Please rise for the invocation by our very own Senator David Parks.
Thank you, Madam President. Let us pray. Thank you, Lord, for this day you have given us. Lord, we come before you to welcome your presence amongst us during this special legislative session. As we strive to conclude today's series of discussions, meetings, and hearings, we thank you for guiding our thoughts and actions toward the most productive outcomes. We pray that you give each member here the strength and wisdom to accomplish the task that must be accomplished to place our state back on a solid, prosperous footing. May all members of this body work faithfully and courageously with compassion toward that which is best for our state and its residents during this critical time. We especially give thanks to all the hardworking, dedicated employees who, without their expertise and devotion, we would find our work impossible to accomplish. Bless this legislative body and its staff. And finally, may God bless Nevada's Governor Sisolak, giving him inspiration, guidance, and direction during these very difficult times. Amen.
Thank you. Please remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. Order of business number 3, reading and approval of the journal. By previous order of the Senate, the reading of the journal is dispensed with, and the President and Secretary are authorized to make the necessary corrections and additions. Order of business numbers. Oh, we're going to have a little recess here.
Test, test, test. Test. Test, test, test. Test, test, test. Test, test, test. Test, test, test. Okie dokie.
All right. The Senate will come back to order. Order of business number 6, messages from the Assembly.
Assembly Chamber, Carson City, July 15, 2020. To the Honorable Senate, I have the honor to inform the Honorable Body the Assembly on this day passed Senate Bill number 3. Also on July 16, 2020, the Honorable Senate, I have the honor to inform the Honorable Body the Assembly on this day passed as amended Assembly Bill number 4. Signed, Carol Ayala Sala, Assistant Chief Clerk of the Assembly. End of messages.
Thank you. Order of business number 9, motions, resolutions, and notices. Senator Cannizzaro.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that Mark Cronin from TNV-TV be accepted and accredited as a member of the press, and that he be allowed to use the appropriate meeting facilities in the legislative building.
Thank you, Senator Cannizzaro. Senator Cannizzaro has made a motion. Are there any remarks? All right, hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries.
That concludes order of business number 9.
Thank you. Order of business number 10, introduction, first reading, and reference.
Assembly Bill number 4, introduced by Senate Committee of the Whole, revises the formula for determining the tax on net proceeds of minerals extracted. End of bill.
Thank you. Senator Ratty.
I move to refer AB4 to the Committee of the Whole.
Thank you. Senator Ratty has moved to refer Assembly Bill 4 to the Committee of the Whole. Are there any objections to the referral? All right. If not, so ordered.
And that concludes order of business number 10.
All right. I think we're going back here to order of business number 9, motions, resolutions, and notices. Senator Cannizzaro.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the Senate resolve itself into a Committee of the Whole to consider Assembly Bill number 4 in work session and any other matters relating to the state's budget shortfall, with Senator Cannizzaro serving as chair and Senator Ratty serving as vice chair.
Thank you. Senator Cannizzaro has made a motion. Are there any remarks? All right. Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed,
Aye.
nay. Motion carries. We are going into recess for the Committee of the Whole.
Committee of the Whole will come to order. We will open the Committee of the Whole hearing on Assembly Bill number 4, which revises the formula for determining the tax on the net proceeds of minerals extracted. For members of the committee, you will have a copy of Assembly Bill 4 in front of you, as it is also available online for those of you who are watching online. We also have accompanied with it an exhibit as well. Committee members should have been provided here in the chamber and also available online for those of you joining us. We have with us this evening to walk us through Assembly Bill number 4, our very capable and trusted staff, Russell Ginden from the Fiscal Analysis Division, and we will turn it over to him. He will be joining us remotely to talk about the bill, and we'll open it up for questions from the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Russell Ginden, Principal Deputy Fiscal Analyst with the Fiscal Analysis Division of Legislative Counsel Bureau. And I just would like to start by noting that, as your nonpartisan legislative staff, I neither advocate for or against legislative measures being considered by the legislature. I've been asked to go through AB4 in its first reprint that was just passed out of the Assembly. It's a relatively short bill. What the bill does is it revises the formula for determining the tax on the net proceeds of minerals extracted. And I'll just state up front here that you may catch me saying NPM instead of net proceeds of minerals, because it's just easier to say and it's become sort of part of my vernacular. So what the bill does in Section 1 is it actually reduces the amount of the deductions that a mining operation can take against their gross proceeds to calculate their net proceeds by 40%. And that's actually effectuated by, if you look at language on page 2 on line 9, you can see that that's done by capping the amount of abatements that are listed there in the new subparagraphs that are being created. But it's actually existing law with regards to deductions that exist in current statute to limit those to that you can take no more than 60% of those deductions. Then it's worth pointing out that on page 3 of the bill, on line 10, you can see there's the new paragraph B that's being created where royalties are excluded from the 60% restriction. And the reason for that is because the royalty proceeds that are paid to the royalty recipient, it is the royalty recipient that actually is responsible for filing the return and paying the taxes on the royalties. So thus the mining operation is allowed to deduct those from their calculation to get the net. If we did not do that, then there would be double tax being paid on the royalties, and thus if we kept it inside the 60%, then that 40% would end up getting taxed again along with the 100% that gets paid by the royalties. So I just thought that was worth noting when you see that we're striking, not including the royalties, and that's the reason why. And then Section 4 of the bill actually makes the provisions of this bill effective for the current calendar year 2020 that we're in. So thus the provisions of the 60% cap on the amount of deductions that can be taken by a mining operation to subtract then from their gross to get their net proceeds that would be subject then to the applicable NPM tax rate determined by Chapter 362. When the mining operation will file their return in February 16 of calendar year 21, that is FY21 that we're in, they will be calculating their actual net proceeds based on the actual calendar year 2020 mining activity under these provisions with the 60% restriction on the amount of deductions that can be taken. And so with that, Madam Chair, that really concludes my presentation of the bill. And with that, I can answer questions about the bill, or I can proceed on with going through the exhibit, which just would allow me to walk through for the members of the Senate Committee of the Whole the estimate that comes out of this bill. And then because of the amendment in first reprint form, I will have to do, because the provisions of AB4 will also apply to the estimated payment that will be made under the provisions of SB3 that this committee heard yesterday. And so with that, I will wait. If you want me to just continue to proceed with the presentation of the table and then take questions afterwards, or if they wanted me to pause and take questions on AB4 first.
Mr. Ginden, if you would like to, we can actually, I think, go through the table and then just take questions at the end.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So what you have is a table that was put together to try and document the estimate for the provisions of AB4 itself in terms of what would be the estimated impact on the tax payment that would be paid in FY21 for calendar year 2020. And so to do that exercise, we first used the calendar year 2019 actual data that we had by mining operator that we received from the Department of Taxation to simulate what would be the potential impact. And so you can see that the table is set up to have 4 separate tables. So table 1 actually shows you the first line in that table is the current statute using the calendar year 2019 data. And so, again, I know we just went through some of this yesterday, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. But this is the aggregated results for all types of mining operations statewide that occurred in calendar year 2019 as reported by the Department of Taxation based on information reported to them by the individual mining operations. So you can see that in calendar year 2019, there's about $7.6 billion of gross proceeds, with about approximately $5.5 billion in deductions, generating net proceeds of approximately $2.3 billion. So that ends up being a net to gross ratio of 30.2%. Then you can see the average effective tax rate is 4.92%. Remembering again, for the net proceeds of minerals tax, the tax rate is constitutionally restricted to 5%. Then you can just see there, I've listed the different sort of breakouts with the local government tax rate portion being that portion that comes from the property tax rate that would be imposed by the local governments. And that would be the counties, the cities, towns, GIDs, other types of districts that would exist in the tax district in which the mining operation exists. Then you have the school district 75-cent rate that's part of the Nevada plan funding formula. You have the state 17-cent tax rate. And those 3 rates there, they are what are referred to as the combined property tax rate. And then finally, you have shaded in gray is the state general fund tax rate portion. And it's worth pointing out here again that the general fund rate is actually the difference between the MPM tax rate that comes out of the statutory provisions for determining the tax rate, less the combined property tax rate. So thus, if the rate is the combined property tax rate, then there is no general fund rate such that there would be general fund money generated by from the net proceeds of that specific mining operation. So also by walking through the table, this is the calculation that each individual mining operation is doing in a sense. So with that is that's the actual data that we know. So then the next line is simulating AB4. So went through by each mine and reduced their deductions by 40%, or actually did what the bill does and capped their deductions out at 60% of what's allowed under the current law, and then used that to recalculate the net proceeds and walk that to the tax rate determination table that's in statute, and then recomputed the net proceeds of minerals tax that would be due. So that's table 1. So then perhaps the easier way to look at it then is table 2. So this shows you the change in the impact of AB4 and current statute. So again, I will be concentrating on the state general fund portion, but you can see the table there does show the increments for the other portions that would get, because all all rates that will be imposed against the net proceeds will benefit because, right, you're reducing the amount of deductions, thus you're increasing the tax base. But and then because of that, it could affect the net to gross ratio, which could also then affect the tax rate that would be imposed against that mining operation. So looking at this in the shaded area in Table 2, you see that AB4, if it had been in place in calendar 2019, would have been estimated to generate approximately $46.4 million based on the actual calendar year 2019 data. So then Table 3 just shows you in percent terms what that dollar increase from Table 2 would be compared to the current statute amount. So as you can see for the general fund portion, it would be an 87.2% increase in the general fund portion of the net proceeds of minerals due to the effect of AB4. Finally, then, as I stated at the beginning, is, well, what would be the potential estimate for FY21 and calibrating that against the current budget fiscal consensus forecast. So what you see there, the current statute FY21 consensus estimate that was done by Budget and Fiscal, and the Department of Taxation is the 62.7 million that you see shown there in the darker gray shading. Thus, this is sort of a static, status quo type of analysis. So we applied the 87.2% increase to that consensus estimate, and so that yields that it would generate 117.4 million that you see shown there. Thus, the increment is just to the right of that, which is the $54.7 million rounding. That AB4 would have generated, is estimated to generate in FY21, and that is based on the payment that mines will make in FY21 based on the actual calendar year 2020 mining activity period that we're in now, sitting here in July 16th. So with that, then, I have to go through that because the bill then in first reprint form as amended by the Assembly, the 60% cap on reductions provisions will apply to the estimated payment that will be required to be made in FY21 based on the estimate for calendar 21's mining activity period. And so you may recall from yesterday that was estimated to be approximately $54.5 million based on the provisions in SB3 requiring the estimated payment, and thus what you get that extra payment. But now because of the 60% cap on deductions would also apply, then that would be estimated to generate approximately another $47.5 million for that estimated payment due to the application of AB4 and SB3. Thus, the total additional payments that will be made due to SB3 and AB4 in FY21 would be approximately $156.6 million. But the increment over SB3 is $102.2 million, because remember, SB3 was the $54.5 million that was on the sheets for the deliberations that were going on this special session. And so with that, Madam Chair, I think that's the information that I wanted to provide, which with regards to the actual provisions in AB4 in its first reprint, and then the potential estimated revenue based on the consensus estimate for FY21 based on calendar year 2020, and then the consensus estimate for the additional payment based on the additional estimated payment required under SB3 adjusted for the effect of AB4.
And thank you so much, Mr. Ginden, for being with us and being able to just walk us through the technical pieces of this bill. We very much appreciate it. At this point in time, we will open it up for questions from members of the committee. Senator Settlemyre.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ginden, for being with us and being able to just walk us through the technical pieces of this bill. We very much appreciate it. At this point in time, we will open it up for questions from members of the committee. Senator Settlemyre. Thank you, Madam Chair. I was wondering on the concept of the reduction of the deductions, what day would that start? Does that start on the business's calendar year, our calendar year, a regular calendar year, the day the governor signs it, or when would that reduction of deduction begin?
The deductions would apply to calendar year 2020. So even though we're sitting here in July 16th, it would apply to the full calendar year. So thus, when the mining operation files its required tax return on February 16, 2021, to report its gross proceeds and thus its deductions, this 60% will apply to that calculation for determining the net proceeds from actual calendar year 2020 mining to determine then their MPM taxes due in FY21 based on calendar year 2020. So it'll apply to the whole calendar year period.
Okay, thank you for that. So it's retroactive in that respect. But as you were indicating, it's not really, it really just reduces the amount of the deduction, correct? It's not really an increase in a rate, correct?
What it does is it reduces the amount of, by capping the deductions at 60%, it reduces the amount of deductions that the taxpayer is allowed to take by 40%. Thus, what that does is everything else the same, right? You're subtracting a lower amount from your gross proceeds, thus yielding a higher net proceeds, to which then the applicable MPM tax rate would be applied to determine the MPM tax due.
So this bill does not change the MPM rate.
It does not change the 5% rate. The 5% maximum rate isn't constitutionally restricted to the 5%. What can happen under the MPM is by given a fixed gross proceeds amount and then lowering the amount of actual deductions that can be taken against the determined net. That the result of that would be is to increase the net to gross ratio. Thus, depending where that entity was under current law, they could end up getting a higher MPM tax rate as they walk through the tax rate bracket that's in NRS 362.140. But they couldn't go any higher than 5%. So that some entities could end up getting a higher rate. For instance, if they had a 40% MPM ratio, say under current law, that would end up generating a NPM rate under the provisions in NRS 362.140 of 4%. Thus, if the effect of AB4 was by lowering the amount of deductions, raising the amount of net, would drive the net to gross ratio to say over 50%, then they would be at the maximum 5% rate. Thus, the MPM rate for that entity would go from the 4% to the 5%. Then depending on the property tax rate for that, where that mine is located, what will happen is that actually ends up increasing the portion that would go to the state general fund. That is the way the tax would work under current law, and then with the application of AB4 in its first reprint.
Thank you, Mr. Ginnan. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Additional questions from members of the committee at this time. Senator Keycapper.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Gindan. It's been a while since you and I have talked about mining taxes. Is the 60% in the bill from a specific, is it there for a specific reason? I may have missed it when you were talking about the royalties deduction, but what is the trigger on the 60%?
I'm not sure I follow in terms of it being a trigger. There's no trigger. It's just what a taxpayer will do is all the deductions still stay in place that are currently in statute. Those deductions remain. So the mining company will still take those deductions. They're just restricted that they can't take any more than 60% of those deduction amounts as the amount that they can deduct from their gross proceeds in determining their net proceeds.
Yeah, no, I get that. I apologize. Russell used the wrong term. Let me ask you this. Is 60% arbitrary? Could we change that number?
Yes, I mean, I should have pointed out that this bill is similar to Assembly Bill 428 from the 2011 session, and that bill was actually, instead of 60%, it was 40%.
So at what level
So
does it
it's up
stop
to the
becoming?
legislature here to decide what that percentage would be in terms of what they would like to set it at.
So at what level does it stop becoming a net proceeds tax?
I believe that question would be more appropriate to be directed to General Counsel Kevin Powers from the Legal Division.
Thank you, Mr. Ginden. I appreciate it. The confines of how we tax mining is still restricted by Article 10, Section 5 of the Constitution, right? So that's what sets up the maximum 5% rate.
Yes, that's correct. And I see we have Kevin on, so maybe Mr. Powers could address your first question, and then probably he'll address the second one at the same time.
Madam Chair, it's Kevin Powers, LCB Legal Division. Would you like me to address those questions?
Yes, please, Mr. Powers, if you could.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record again, Kevin Powers, General Counsel, LCB Legal Division. To answer the Senator's question, it's going to require some historical background. I will try to keep it as brief as possible. Article 10, Section 5, as it exists now, uses the term net proceeds. But that term and the term proceeds have been used in the Constitution since it was adopted in 1864. No constitutional provision has ever defined the term net proceeds. So when a term is undefined in the Constitution, generally it's given its ordinary and common meaning, but the legislature also, through implementing legislation, could give further meaning to the term, in this case, proceeds or net proceeds. In the first legislative session in 1865, the legislature gave meaning to the term proceeds by developing the first net proceeds tax. That tax, the legislature created a standard deduction of $20 per ton. So for every ton of ore extracted from the earth, that was the gross yield. The mining operation got to deduct $20. That then was the net proceeds. It was standard across the board for every mining company. There were no itemized deductions. That continued for several decades into the 1800s. By the 1890s, the legislature enacted different legislation and started to provide itemized deductions. The first three itemized deductions were for extraction, transportation, and reduction of the ores. That continued for several decades. Then in the early 1900s, mid-1900s, in that range, the legislature started to expand the list of deductions, but it also would take some deductions away or adjust deductions, and that has continued, obviously, up through the present day. What the history shows us is that the legislature gives meaning to the term proceeds or net proceeds in the Constitution, and that there's a wide range of how the legislature can interpret that. It can have a standard deduction like it did in 1865, or it can have itemized deductions as it does now. But in between there, it can adjust those deductions in a manner that it determines to be reasonable. So the standard, to answer the Senator's question, is that the legislature has the power to determine the reasonable level of deductions. The courts, the Nevada Supreme Court, has said that the legislature is entitled to deference in its determination of the reasonableness of deductions, and the court will not question it or overturn the legislature's decision unless it's manifestly unjust or grossly unjust. And that standard is obviously a broad standard for the legislature to work within. So yes, one extreme would be the legislature removed all deductions. That would be patently unconstitutional because it would essentially become a gross proceeds tax, not a net proceeds tax. At the other end, if the legislature gave the mining organizations 99.9% of their gross is not taxed, that probably would be unconstitutionally unreasonable in how you define net proceeds. But in between those two extremes, the legislature is given a great deference by the courts to come up with a reasonable definition of what deductions are allowable from gross yield to arrive at net proceeds. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm certainly open for any other questions.
Madam Chair.
Yep, please.
Thank you,
Senator.
Mr. Powers. I certainly appreciate it. So there's also recently been the addition and subtraction of individual deductions, right? I recall at one point we had made some changes to healthcare deductions. Is that accurate? So then could we also pick and choose which of these deductions we perhaps would want to keep or throw aside as compared to just sort of lumping off a certain percentage?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, for the record, Kevin Powers, General Counsel, LCD Legal Division. That is correct, Senator Kiefer. Over time, the legislature has added and withdrawn deductions within the last 2 decades. There have been 1 or 2 of the deductions withdrawn. Ultimately, the legislature has to determine the correct balance of deductions to place against the gross to come up with a reasonable net proceeds. But the legislature has significant discretion in determining which deductions are allowable and which deductions are not.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Dennis.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm not sure if this might be for Mr. Gindin. I'm trying to, I want to make sure I understand. So under the scenario that we have on the sheet, local government tax rate portion, can you define that? That one in the school district one?
Yes. The local government tax rate portion that you see there, it would actually vary by mining operation, but because what composes that category is at a minimum, the mine exists in a county. So there would be the county debt and operating rate that would be in there. If the mine exists in a town or city, then their operating and or debt rate, they would have an operating rate. They could have a debt rate that would be applicable. And then there could be other things like general improvement district, special assessments that would exist. And then also the school a school debt rate would be included in that local government portion. And I've just itemized out here the 75-cent rate to see that because of it plays its role right in the funding of K-12 education under the Nevada plan. And then the state 17-cent debt rate, which is the rate that's the property tax rate that we use to fund our capital improvement projects through the bonds that are issued and then paid off. So that's what would be making up the combined property tax rate, and then the local government are those pieces that I specifically mentioned. And I will probably address the question that may coming that you look down below in table 4 and you can see those boxes are blanked out. And it's not that they will get additional money under the provisions of AB4. It's just that I'm estimating the general fund as sort of the state general fund guy here for the legislature. And I don't do estimates for the local government portions, any of those rates that I mentioned. And we will from time to time do the 75-cent rate and the 17-cent debt rate. But I just didn't, we don't have a consensus estimate to which I can calibrate against like I do for the general fund rate.
So on the local government tax rate, you're saying that that's different depending on the county? Do they determine that rate?
Yes, the local governments have the ability to control their operating and or debt rate within the provisions in statute. Again, though, they cannot exceed the $3.64 cap that's in law. And so there's a process that the local governments would go through when they're setting their rates, and the Department of Taxation administers that to make sure that their combined rate would not exceed the statutory cap of 364.
So they could choose to lower that if they wanted to?
You are correct. That a local government could lower or raise their rate. And then as they do that, that could impact the rate that belongs to the state general fund. And in fact, that's a very good observation. And that's what we see that goes on from year to year is that the local governments may change their rate and thus that affects the portion that belongs to the state general fund, which then actually has the effect of increasing the volatility that we can see in the general fund's portion and the ability to then estimate that.
Is that because that local comes out first?
Yes, basically, when you look at the statutory provisions for the rate determination in NRS 362.140, basically the minimum rate is the combined property tax rate. So then the general fund sits there waiting to see if the actual tax rate that the mine has to pay is greater than that combined property tax rate. If it is, then the general fund rate is the difference between the required rate to be paid by the mine and the combined property tax rate. So thus, from year to year, that rate can change. The good thing is for the state general fund portion is that probably somewhere around 96 to 97% of the general fund portion of the MPM comes from gold and silver. And the vast majority of the gold and silver operations, they either have net proceeds greater than $4 million that requires the maximum 5% rate to be imposed, or they end up with a net to gross ratio over 50%, then also requiring the maximum 5% rate to be imposed. Thus, the higher the rate that ends up being imposed, the higher the chance that there's a increment for the state general fund rate, and then the higher that general fund rate would be.
Okay, and then my last question is on the school district, the 75 cent. Under this scenario, there would be more money for schools. Would it only be in those counties that are receiving that, or would it be statewide?
So I just need a moment to catch my thought. So yes, the 75 cent rate would generate additional money. In fact, you can see estimated in the table, it's under the simulation for calendar year 2019, it's approximately 90%. So thus, if you had an estimate for calendar year 2020, again, assuming the same status quo sort of static analysis, it would go up by the 90%. Yes, it would depend on the mining operations existing in each county. And obviously, as you're aware, some counties have much more mining going on than others in terms of how much the 75 cent rate would generate for the schools. And then it is part of the property tax portion. And so, as you know, under that goes in, and 2/3 of it is outside the formula and 1/3 is inside, such that the state holds harmless against the 1/3. I think it's also worth pointing out, Senator Dennis, that the way the net proceeds of minerals is handled with regards to the funding of schools, the net proceeds of minerals for paid for one fiscal year actually is then used in the budget for the next fiscal year. So it's in a sense budgeted in arrears. And the reason for that is, right, it takes some of the volatility due to the uncertainty that can go into the generation of this tax and being able to estimate it. So that is one of the things. So actually, this tax, the provisions of SB3 and AB4, generating additional net proceeds of minerals tax in FY21 for the 75 cent rate will be a benefit to FY 2022, not FY 2021, like it will be for all the other rates for the counties, the towns, cities, and the state general fund, the state debt rate.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Pickard.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And with your indulgence, I have a few clarifying questions before I know if my substantive questions make sense. Mr. Ginnan, thank you for sticking with us so late in the evening. First, when you talk about a consensus estimate, I heard you name some of those that participated in that decision. Can you remind me of who's involved in coming up with those estimates?
Yes, Senator. It was done by your fiscal staff, the economists from the budget office, and staff from the Department of Taxation is the department that's responsible for administering the net proceeds of minerals tax. So thus we looked at the data, we looked at where the current gold price is, looked at sort of what we thought the production would be. We also had information from the mines that they're required to prepare an estimate for calendar year 2020 and file that in March. So that occurred in March 2020. So we had that information. And so based on that information as well as our own, we came up with the consensus estimate for calendar year 2020 that you see there of the $62.7 million.
All right, thank you. And so you answered my next question, which was if you got industry input, but obviously you do. Have we, you made mention of the estimates, and I assume that includes economic theory, that when we see profits going down, investments go down, and that sort of thing. Was that factored in?
The net proceeds tax, as I stated, it's a difficult tax to forecast because of being a net one, and with the rates that can change, and then affecting the portion that would belong to the general fund. So we look at the historical information in terms of deductions and gold prices, and then you can go to a website called kitco.com, and they're tracking on pretty much a daily basis the gold prices. So when we were doing this in June, we sort of knew halfway through the calendar year 2020 where the gold prices were tracking, and then made assumptions for that going forward for the remainder. And then again, based on some of that information that we had reported from the mines in their March 2020 report, made assumptions for deductions, and then that was taken in. So then that actually answers your question. Can I tell you that we explicitly take some of the factors that you're talking into account? Probably not. Are they implicitly in your mind as a forecaster when you're thinking about making up an estimate for not only net proceeds of minerals, but any revenue source that we're producing estimates? Sometimes it's just really hard to quantify. And if you would ask me and say, can you show me in your estimate where you took account of that? The honest answer would be is that I can't show you where I explicitly accounted for that and can pull it out of the estimate. But it's in your mind as a forecaster and trying to process all information when you're making an estimate.
Sure, and that makes perfect sense to me. But now when we talk about, you mentioned rates a few times, I'm a little confused because I thought that we were saying that the rates aren't changing. Did I misunderstand that? The calculation for the tax itself, we're not changing. We're only changing the amount of deductions that are being allowed. Is that correct, or do I have that wrong?
You are correct in that all the effect of AB4 is to change the amount of actual deductions that a mining operation can use to subtract from their gross to determine their net. So then the provisions under 362.140 require you to take that net proceeds and divide it by the gross proceeds to get a ratio. That percentage is then, you have to walk it through the graduated scale that's in that statutory section to determine the actual MPM tax rate. Thus, even under current law, year to year, some of the mines, their tax rate can vary because their net to gross ratio is varying. But the minimum rate that's in place is the combined property tax rate.
Okay.
So, thus by changing the amount of net proceeds, by changing the amount of deductions, you can change that net to gross ratio, and you could affect the tax rate. But again, the 5% maximum is that is the cap of the maximum rate that a mining operation could end up paying.
Okay, and I apologize if I weren't clear. The effective rate may change, but the calculation itself stays the same. Is that fair?
That is correct. There are no amendments to the provisions of NRS 362.140.
Right, thank you. And then you mentioned that we're going between 87 and 97% increase in what is brought into the state. So we're effectively doubling this industry's tax. In your recollection, have we ever doubled an industry's tax without notice to them or their input?
You know, I've had a long history here, so I don't recall off the top of my head that there may have been an increase of this, but that doesn't mean there wasn't. I'm just able to say here tonight that I don't recall.
Sure.
I would have to
and
go
that's
back
fair. It's
and do the analysis to
11:30 at
see.
night. I understand. I'm just, let me ask this other question, though. Have we ever applied a tax to any industry retroactively, to your recollection?
Again, to my recollection, I can't recall. It could have occurred. I just don't recall, because I'm trying to think of the sessions where we've had some more of the major tax changes or created new taxes. And so the only one that would come to my mind is potentially the commerce tax from the 2015 session. But I don't believe so, because we based that tax on a fiscal year period,
Right.
not a calendar year period. And thus we had it become effective that July 1st after the end, the conclusion of the session.
Okay, and I appreciate that. That squares with
Madam
my...
Chair,
Oh, yes.
Madam Chair, I might be able to offer some additional insight on that.
Thank you, Mr. Powers.
Again, for the
please.
record, Kevin Powers. Thank you. Again, for the record, Kevin Powers, General Counsel, LCB Legal Division. Applying a tax during the current taxable year is not a retroactive application of the tax, because the taxpayer is already anticipated to owe a tax liability. So adjusting the deductions during the current tax year, which is they'll be paying taxes for 2020 in 2021, is not retroactive application. We actually have an example of this in Nevada with regard to the net proceeds tax from 1867. In April of 1867, the legislature changed the net proceeds tax. As I mentioned, it was originally a standard deduction of $20 per ton of ore. In 1867, in April, the legislature changed that to $18 per ton of ore if you did not use a roasting or smelting process. If you did use a roasting or smelting process, then it was a standard deduction of $40 per ton of ore. That was done in April of 1867. The Manhattan Silver Mining Company challenged that as an impermissible retroactive tax under the Nevada Constitution. It went to the Nevada Supreme Court. The Nevada Supreme Court rejected the mining company's argument, saying that applying changes to the collection of the tax in the taxable year that is presently being dealt with is not a retroactive application and is not unconstitutional.
No, and
Thank
I
you, Madam
appreciate
Chair.
that, and I was probably a little inartful in how I asked the question, because legally, I understand the difference in terms of retroactive application in law. I was just thinking, in my lifetime, have we ever done this? I'm not as concerned about what happened in 1865, but I certainly understand the legal side of that, because, of course, our decisions are precedential, and we sometimes look back that far. Mr. Powers, while I've got you, maybe you can answer. As I understand, you said that this could be challenged if the legislature were unreasonable, or the deference would be given if the legislature determines it to be reasonable. However, I understood Mr. Guinan's question to my colleague's question that this was an arbitrary figure. Is it your office's opinion that it doesn't matter if it's an arbitrary number as long as we deem it to be the right number, that's good enough for the Supreme Court?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, again, Kevin Powers, General Counsel, LCB Legal Division. I believe my colleague, Mr. Ginden, did not answer the question directly about being arbitrary. He answered yes. to that, the legislature could change the amount, because in the legislation proposed in 2011, it was at a 40% amount. Now this is at 60%. I think he was answering yes, the legislature had that flexibility. He was not answering that this was an arbitrary number. The number the legislature chooses just has to be reasonable. And within that range of not being manifestly unjust, as long as the legislature's choice of deduction amounts, whether itemized deductions, a standard deduction, or a combination of both, as long as it's reasonable, it will be entitled to deference by the court, and it will be upheld unless the court were to find it was manifestly unjust. Again, I do not believe that Mr. Gindin agreed that this was arbitrary. I think he stated that there was flexibility and that in prior legislation, the legislature proposed a different number.
All right. Well, and I appreciate that very much. And since Mr. Gindin is still here, maybe I can go back to him and ask him to clarify. Mr. Gindin, can you tell me the criteria used to derive the 60% number? What calculation did you use, or what analysis, what rationale did you use to get to that 60%?
First, I would agree with Mr. Powers' assessment in terms of did not say it was arbitrary. But also then to your current question, I didn't come up with the 60%, right? This is not my bill as your legislative staff. I'm merely here to present the provisions of the bill tonight as drafted to you, the legal division was asked to draft this bill at the 60%. I was asked to do the analysis 60%, and so that's the only ability that I have to respond to that question.
Sure, and I appreciate that. I don't want to put you on the spot on that. I would like to know who came up with it, because I would like to know what the rationale was. But we'll move on, and I appreciate your indulgence, Madam Chair. Just a couple of brief questions, and I think this will be for Mr. Powers. I caught the tail end of some of the testimony on the assembly side, and there were a lot of teachers calling for us to pass this bill in order to raise money for education. And as I sat down and started reading the bill just before we started the presentation, I don't see any language that actually sends any of this money to to education. Can you show me where that is, Mr. Powers?
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, Kevin Powers, General Counsel, LCB Legal Division. I believe the answer is going to turn on the amount of the net proceeds that goes to the local governments and affects the local taxing districts. The portion that goes to the state general fund. It does not go into the state distributive school account. However, when you reduce the deductions, as Mr. Gindin mentioned, you increase the amount that becomes subject to the tax rate, and that increased amount will also be subject to the local property taxes, portion of that which will go to the schools. So the schools from their local property tax assessments will experience an increase of revenue from this change in the deductions. The portion that goes to the state, however, will just go to the state general fund. Now, the legislature is free to appropriate that money to the schools, but right now, as it stands, it will go to the state general.
All right, and that's a critical point then, because we don't know what a future legislature might do to appropriate it. But my understanding was that property taxes stay in the county in which those are collected. Is that not true?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Kevin Powers, LCB Legal Division. I'll let Mr. Gindin comment on this as well. If it's truly a local assessment, it will stay in the local county. However, the local governments also, when they collect certain taxes, they're actually acting as collectors of state taxes, and they'll send a portion to the state. So it's going to depend on the actual tax being collected. But if it's truly a local assessment, it will stay in the county where it's collected.
All right, and that makes sense to me. So I guess the last question I have is, we were talking about, and Mr. Gindin, I apologize if I was mistaken or misunderstood you, but I understand that the calculations are based on, or the estimates were based on the price of gold. But we have many other minerals. Were the rates actually spread out across all the different materials that are mined in Nevada, or did we peg this to gold?
Specifically, the way, sort of the model that your fiscal staff uses, and I believe it's somewhat comparable for staff from the Department of Taxation and staff at the Budget Division. But I won't explicitly speak on their behalf. I'll just talk to you what your staff did. When we look at trying to estimate the net proceeds of minerals tax, we principally concentrate on the gold and silver because, again, it generates approximately 96 to 97%, versus all the other types of mining are that, right, 3 to 4%. So we do look at the price of gold and the production of gold and silver and attempting to estimate the gold, the amount of the general fund tax that would come from gold and silver. Then we roll all the other types of mining up into an all other category and estimate that remaining 3 to 4%. And again, there we try and look at it and make assumptions at it. But as a forecaster, I'm going to try and spend my time on trying to hit the 96 to 97% target versus trying to hit the 3 to 4% target.
Sure, and that makes a lot of sense. I'm just wondering then, and Madam Chair, thank you for your indulgence. Last question. How do we then protect the mines that aren't mining gold and silver, but something that is less profitable from becoming negative if we push a tax that was built on the gold and silver model onto them? Sorry, maybe I should ask it this way. Aren't we then crowding out the small operations that don't develop a lot of gold or silver? Doesn't this become kind of a bill that pushes out the competition, the smaller outfits?
I'm not sure how to respond to that, but I will attempt here by saying, well, if you're talking about competition within your class, that is competition within the gold and silver, versus you're talking about, well, the people doing dolomite or barite, well, they're not in competition with gold and silver. And then the net proceeds of minerals tax under current statute treats all taxpayers the same, as well as capping it out at the 60%. That they're going to calculate their gross based on whatever it is, mineral they're extracting and the price that they got for that to get their gross. And then they'll take their deductions that are allowed and calculate their net and then apply it. Now, just like any tax, and then thus a tax increase. Can it have economic effects on an industry? Yes. Do I know what those will be? No. And because, right, they all have their different elements based on the markets that they're in, that the mineral that they're mining, and what they're and the demand for that as you pointed out, the other competitors that could be out there also supplying that product.
All right. Thank you so much. I do appreciate all your effort in your late night. Thank you, Madam Chair.
And Madam Chair, this is Kevin Powers again for the record. I want to do one follow-up on that might help Senator Pickard in this regard as well. This bill is based on the existing statutory structure in NRS Chapter 362. And right now, there's no differentiation between the type of mineral being extracted and how the rates are applied. However, that's a statutory decision. It's not required by the Constitution. Under Article 10, Section 1, there's a uniform and equal taxation and assessment clause, and that applies to most properties, so you can't deviate between the types of property to a certain degree unless there's a specific constitutional exception. However, the Uniform and Equal Taxation and Assessment Clause does not apply to the mining net proceeds tax because that's under Article 10, Section 5. And when the amendment was proposed, it was to remove mining and net proceeds from the uniform and equal. So the legislature could, in this legislation, distinguish between gold, silver, other precious metals, and other different types of mining. So you would not necessarily have to have the same deductions for every mining operation. You could choose which operation gets which types of deductions, as long as there's a rational basis for making the distinction. There's a reasonable level of disparity between the types of deductions for the types of minerals involved. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Powers. That actually helped, particularly on the rational basis piece. And your command of the law continues to amaze me. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Gocochea.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and it's pretty much along the same lines. Mr. Gindin, if you could, I'm really surprised that the average effective tax rate is at 495. I didn't think it would be quite that close. Can you kind of walk through that very briefly? I believe the cap is that if you don't generate over $4 million, then I think your effective rate is at like 2%, and then it changes. Could you just walk through that quickly for us?
Yes, Senator. Again, under the tax rate provisions in statute, it's actually that the rate is 2% if your net to gross percentage is 10%. If it's 10 to 18, it's 2.5%. If it's 18 to 26%, it's a 3% tax rate. If it's 26 to 34, it's a 3.5% tax rate. If it's 34 to 42, it's a 4% tax rate. And if it's 42 to 50, then it's a 4.5% tax rate. And then if you're 50 or more in terms of your net to gross ratio, you're at the maximum 5%. But then also, you also mentioned that if your actual net proceeds exceed $4 million, then you're at the 5% rate. So that's the tax brackets that's as graduated out in the statutes.
Yes, thank you. And I guess I just wanted you to walk through that quickly, because there actually is somewhat of a difference if you're in a particular industry or mining a particular product that has a lower return. There is, in fact, a little flexibility as far as the rate. But I would have thought it would have been, given all of the mines, 103 or whatever producers we've got in the state, it would have been, the average rate would have been a little less than the 495. So I was surprised at that, because again, aggregate producers clearly wouldn't be generating, at least the smaller ones, that $4 million cap that would take them to the 5% rate, I wouldn't think. So is that correct? Is there a little adjustment, let's say gypsum or aggregate, some of those that have a lesser return? I would have thought they would have pulled that average rate down.
Again, I should have pointed out when my first response to your question, Senator, so I apologize, that even though I walked through those brackets, that, again, the minimum rate is the combined property tax rate. So if that's going to exceed the rate that would come out of the brackets. So for instance, if you were in the 10 to 18% net to gross ratio, and that would say, well, your rate should be 2.5. But if the combined property tax rate is 3%, then the tax rate will be the 3%. So that's when you look across, you can see then the nuances of this tax when you, to get to your point, as you start looking at these different kinds of mining that are not gold and silver that occur in the different counties, then you have to, you're not only trying to look at the net to gross ratio that they may have, but actually what's the combined property tax rate that they may have in place. And then I think just worth adding the additional information, given the question that you have, Senator, that the average effective tax rate, yes, it does appear to be relatively high when you look at that. But again, I would go back to it's gold and silver that, as I stated, it's the majority of the tax being paid. And the majority of those taxpayers in the gold and mining, they're at the 5% maximum, either because their net to gross ratio is 50 or more, or they have more than $4 million in net proceeds. So then when you have something like the 90% or over of the market at that 5% rate, that's what gives you the average statewide effective rate of that 4.92 or 4.95% range. They're swamping those others that you're mentioning that could have lower effective tax rates.
Thank you. Then just one quick clarification. So technically, the average effective tax rate starts at in most cases, the 364 statutory cap. In most cases, most counties are, at least counties and cities are at the 364. So thank you. I understand, and it's not that big a margin unless you happen to get into one of the really small rural counties where they've got a lesser rate. Thank you.
Senator, I just think it's worth the clarification on that. The maximum combined property tax rate that could be in play is the 364, but if we go look in several of these tax districts that the mines exist in some of these counties, they do not have. They're not at the maximum rate. They have a lower rate imposed as the combined rate, possibly because of the effect of the net proceeds in their particular tax districts allows them to have a lower rate. But you may have in several of these districts a rate that's lower as a combined property tax rate than the 364 cap.
Yes, sir. I'm very familiar with Eureka County's rate. Thank you.
Senator Keycover.
Thank you for the second so late, Madam Chair. Mr. Ginden, I'm scrolling through the most recent bulletin, and I was actually struck by the number of operators that are below the 5% rate. Do you have you may have mentioned this earlier, do you have a breakdown as to how many operators are below the 5% rate?
No, I don't have that information readily available to me tonight, Senator.
Okay. And then
I can compile it, but I just don't have it right now.
No, I appreciate that. I can scroll through it. It's fine. On the sort of policy that you talked about, as we have this step down or stepped up tax rate based on the gross to yield percentage. What strikes me about it is that what it probably is intended to do is incentivize mining companies to get mines into production that are more difficult or more expensive to produce. Is that your understanding of the intent of it? Is there a policy objective behind giving a lower tax rate to a company that produces more difficult to produce minerals?
Thankfully, I wasn't here when this rate bracket was put in place. But I would look at it as an economist that it's somewhat like a progressive tax rate schedule, right? That as the net to gross ratio goes up, that means, right, you have higher net in relation to your deductions. And so thus is, right, as a progressive income tax, as you have more income, you walk up through the income brackets. So here, as you have a higher net to gross ratio, then you're walking up into the tax brackets. So that would be part of my conjecture for answering your question. The other could have just been decisions to go, because remember, the general fund's sitting there only getting money when the actual MPM rate that's imposed is greater than the combined property tax rate. So when this is being designed, could there been some to look at? You got to push them up in the rates to create a general fund rate portion also. But you're going to do that such that they have higher net in relation to their gross.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay. Seeing no further questions from the committee, we want to thank you, Mr. Ginden and Mr. Powers, for being with us and being able to answer our questions and indulge us. We very much appreciate it and know that the hour is late and that you have done a lot of really hard and long and good work for all of us to be able to be here with us this evening and answer questions. So thank you very much. We're very appreciative. At this time, we will go ahead and move to public comment on the bill. Again, I would note that we will be taking this in the same manner in which we have dealt with this public comment period and testimony on the bill for the entirety of this last week or so. For those of you who are watching online and wish to join us for public comment, please make sure that you refer to our agenda for directions to dial in. Once you dial in, you will be entered into a queue of other callers who are waiting to testify, and it's important that you stay on the line until it's your time to speak, otherwise you will lose your place in the queue. Because of time considerations, we are going to be limiting testimony during this period to not more than 2 minutes. The lines are now open for that public testimony, and I would note that if you have more to share with us than the 2-minute allots, you are welcome to submit written testimony, or if you would rather submit written comments, we can certainly take those and add them to the meeting on the legislative website in lieu of your testimony. The email address to submit those written comments is also noted on today's agenda. We are going to move through this comment period in the following fashion. We will take public comment for Assembly Bill number 4, then we will take public comment against Assembly Bill number 4, and then we will take public comment in the neutral position on Assembly Bill number 4. At this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful Legislative Council Bureau broadcast staff who have been able to help facilitate this for us. For those of you who are on the phone waiting to speak, please make sure that you pay attention to the directions that are given by our wonderful staff so that we can best accommodate where it is that you will be giving public testimony. We will now open up the public comment for those of you wishing to speak for Assembly Bill number 4.
For those testifying in favor of the bill, please press *9 now to raise your hand, and we will take callers in order. Caller with the last 3 digits of 130. Slowly state your name and spell it for the record. You have 2 minutes. Please begin.
Good morning. My name is Christine Saunders. That's CHRISTINESAUNDERS. I'm here on behalf of the Progressive Leadership Alliance Nevada in strong support of Assembly Bill 4. For the past 2 decades, PLAN has been calling on this body to hold the mining industry accountable. And you've heard over and over again this past week that what we need is real revenue reform, like taxing the mines, rather than balancing our budget on the backs of working families, children, and Nevada's most vulnerable. Any chance to raise new revenue is a chance to change the programs you cut. I hope you heard the overwhelming testimony in support of this bill earlier tonight. I hope you remember that many current members of this body across the aisle have voted to limit deductions before. Nevadans are counting on you to step up again. Our children are counting on you to step up again. I urge you to listen to them. It's time for long-term solutions that set Nevada's revenue system on the right track. It's time to make mining pay their fair share, and I urge you to vote yes. Thank you.
Please press, sorry about that. Caller with the last 3 digits, 740. Please slowly state your name and spell it for the record. You have 2 minutes. Please start now.
Good morning. Good evening. Good morning. My name is Alex Goff. That is spelled ALEXGOSF. I had a state senator one time tell me that the job of a legislator is walking on the beach and seeing all the starfish that you know will certainly perish if they're left out there. And you have the opportunity to pick one up and throw it back in the ocean. And understanding the job when you get into it, you can't save them all, but you do your hardest to save as many as you can. This pandemic has brought unprecedented pain and suffering onto many Nevadans, as you all know. I don't need to lecture you on this. You are a citizen legislature. I'm sure you've experienced in your own life and in your community some of the pain and suffering that's out there. This bill gives you the opportunity to throw one of those starfish back into the ocean and to assure that a child or a parent has the opportunity that they'll never be able to thank you for. Sadly, many people may not stay up till 1 a.m. to hear this, and they may not know your names. I know you don't do this for fame or for glory, but know that this vote will allow you to save one family. And I know some of you have all the reasons why you should vote against this bill, but all you need is one reason to vote for it. So please, I implore you to find that one reason and support this bill. Thank you. Good night.
Caller with the last three digits, 151, testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
My name is Laura Deitch, Laura, D like David, EI, T like Thomas, S like Sam, C like Charlie, H like Hotel. I am strongly in favor of AB4. I feel like it is high time for mining to pay their fair share, and I would ask our legislature to look out for the whole state of Nevada and make this more fair for everyone. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 554, testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good morning, representatives and senators. My name is Dexter Lim, for the record, Dexter Lim, M as in mining justice. I'm a representative of the Sunrise Movement Las Vegas Hub, and through my organization, a partner of the Nevada Environmental Justice Coalition, here to stand in staunch support of AB4. For the past weeks, we the public have been bringing up the need to make mines finally pay their fair share. We raised the issue when it was unpopular, we raised the issue when you wouldn't entertain discussion on it, and we raised the issue so much because every part of our state is impacted socially, financially, and environmentally by the extractive and capitalistic avarice of the mining corporation. What many seem to fail to recognize is that the mines need us. These are Nevadan lands and Nevadan resources, and the entities such as mines that disturb and pillage them must give their to the Nevadan community. This is not a matter of partisanship, this is a matter of equality. And while I recognize that this bill still doesn't necessarily take us all the way there, it is still forward momentum, so I ask you to be bold, to stand for your constituents, and to pass this bill today. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 098, testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Hi, my name is Stella Kerr, Stella Kurr. I would like to thank everyone for being here very late. I'm in support of this bill. I'm pretty disappointed in a lot of what I'm hearing. I think this bill should be passed because it's long overdue to be passed. This has been talked about since I was a child. It needs to get done because it will bring revenue to our state. There's no reason to vote against it unless you are for corporations and against Nevadans. You could be part of a historic change in our state that would do nothing but help us, nothing at all. So during this financial crisis, I hope that you will take leadership and move our state forward. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 488, testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
NNI. Good morning. My name is Jennifer Cantley, Jennifer, Cantley, Cantley, and I am a member of Nevada Environmental Justice Coalition and a proud environmental activist for climate justice. I am so thankful for all of you that are staying up tonight and listening to this. I believe it is definitely time, as others have said, to tax these mining companies who have made billions of dollars off of Nevadans. And these are people that don't even live in our state. It is time to protect those who do not have money to fix this debt, tax those that have the money. I thank you again, and I fully support this bill.
Caller with the last three digits, 155, testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Christy Cabrera, CHRISTICABRERA. I'm calling on behalf of the Nevada Conservation League in support of AB4. It's time we call on the mining industry to pay their fair share. Nevada's landscape is littered with abandoned and decommissioned mines, and mining shouldn't continue to receive excessive deductions, including deductions for reclamation to clean up the messes they make on our land. We urge your support on this bill. Thank you for your time.
Caller with the last three digits, 055. Testifying in favor of the bill, please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Hello, my name is Ryan Brown, RyanBrown, and I'm calling in strong favor of AB4. As a small business owner, and also coming from industries that are deeply affected by this in such a dire time, this gives us the opportunity finally to hold mining accountable, to pay their fair share, and to finally bring some type of revenue reform that's going to help education and healthcare. It just sends a strong message when we keep big businesses accountable. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 301, testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
For the record, this is Kimberly Mull, KIMBERLYMULL. I'm an advocate for victims of violence against women and children. Nevada has historically been at the top of domestic violence, sexual assault, and sex trafficking in our state. Yet we have the least state-provided funds for victims and service providers. The pandemic has made the rate of domestic violence and violence against children and child abuse even higher than it already was in our state, and we have no money for victims. There are no funds coming in, there are no resources available, and we need any kind of help that we can get to help service these individuals. And any revenue would be beneficial, but having revenue come from a resource that is available, ready to get funds to the victims, and is basically fair share already needed is beneficial. So I urge you to support SB 4. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 705. Testifying in favor of the bill, please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Hi, my name is Jackie Chaklas, JACKIECHIAKULAS. Good morning. I echo the callers before me. This is finally a step in the right direction. We are here, so please vote yes on AB4. You all are there to represent the people of Nevada, and this is what we have been calling for decades. So please vote yes on AB4. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 892, testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Hi, y'all. My name is Sarah Miller, and that's spelled B as in Valor, ERAMILLER. I want to echo what Christine said, how we shouldn't be balancing the budget off the backs of education and off the backs of education, off the backs of healthcare, off the backs of families. Like, we should be taxing corporations. We should be raising revenue. We should be taxing mining because of all the things that they take from our land and the things that they take from our people. Like, this really isn't okay. And if we are so desperately looking for other avenues to save people's lives in this crisis, which we are, and it sounds like we are, then I really hope that you vote in favor of this bill, because like this is an avenue. The more we tax here, like the more we will be able to support people in our state. Thank you so much.
Caller with the last three digits, 084, testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Cynthia Moore, CINTHIAMOORE. I'm a member of the Nevada Environmental Justice Coalition, and I'm calling in support of AB 4. Time and time again, this budget has been balanced on the backs of working families. It is time to look for other solutions. This bill is a step in the right direction. Many have said that this bill will end mining. I ask how. Our state has some minerals and the product that has made them profitable. Where else are they going to go? It is time for mining to step up and pay their fair share. I urge you to set aside partisanship and put Nevada families first. Please vote yes on this bill. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 576, testifying in favor of the bill. Please pronounce your name and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good morning, and thank you, Madam Leader and the members of the Senate, for your dedication to the state. My name is Eric Jang, ERICJENG. On behalf of One API Nevada, we're advocating for the Asian and Pacific Islander community here in Nevada, and we are here to urge senators to speak for. This is a good bill and a step in the right direction. We have seen too many hardworking Nevada families struggling to make ends meet during this pandemic. Too many essential public services flash and too many gaping holes in our healthcare and education that's being cut right now. Meantime, we're reading stories of executives for these largest mine operators raking in tens of millions of dollars. We just saw Barrick Gold's chairman actually cash in $50 million worth of stock. That's how good they're doing. The mines will be okay. It's time for them to pay their fair share of taxes, and they will be okay, and we need all the help we can get. So we urge you to pass Assembly Bill 4. Thank you very much.
Caller with the last three digits, 104, testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes, and you may begin.
Good morning. My name is Maria Teresa Lieberman Barraga for the record. It's spelled MARIA-TERESA, last name LIEBERMANN-PARRAGA. And I am here representing myself and people like my mother and others that have been struggling in this very difficult time. And I am pleading with every single legislator that is listening to all of this testimony and considering this bill to ask yourselves, who will you side with? Will you side with the people, the small business owners, the children that need to have schools that are well funded, the public employees that have been giving their lives to this state, or to an industry that, sure, they brought in jobs, but they haven't paid their fair share since the inception of this state? I ask all the legislators here, what are you going to say to the small business owners that are struggling right now, that can't make the deductions that mining can? What will you say to them if this doesn't pass? I hope it's that you did all you could and that you voted for AB 4. So I ask you all to vote for AB 4. Thank you for your time.
Caller with the last three digits, 525, testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Hi, my name is Anna Perez McKay. That's ANAPEREZ-MCKAY. I'm calling in favor of AB 4. I think that even considering placing all of the cuts and the deficits with coronavirus onto working families and children, our students, is completely unacceptable. It horrifies me that it's even a question that our state could value children and our working families, small businesses, and our people that little. So I implore every single one of you to vote for AB4, to make the mines pay their fair share for once, and to not let these deficits fall on the people who need them the most, to let the companies that have the least to lose pay their small amount, so that those who have the most to lose aren't the ones hurt by this the most. Thank you for your time. Seriously, please consider this. Thank you. I cede my time.
Caller with the last 3 digits. 039. Testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I'm not sure. Okay. My name is Erica Minaberry. That's ErikaMinaberry. And I am also testifying in favor of AB4. And I'm testifying as a 4th-generation Nevadan. My children are 5th-generation Nevadans. My grandparents worked in the mines, and at that time, they were so thankful to have a job opportunity. However, my family has remained a low-income family for the last 4 generations because we just don't have the incentives as working-class people that the corporations do. So the expert testimony that was given, where the person said we have to think about this like an economist, I would encourage you all to think about this like your constituents, because if the cuts go through, my family won't be able to make it in Nevada. So thank you all, and thank you for working such late nights for us. And I hope that you too vote in favor of AB4. I relinquish the rest of my time. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 550, testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Hi, my name is Madeleine Williams. That's Madeleine. Last name Williams, Williams. And I'm calling in support of AB4. In response to the letters that you must have received from various mining associations objecting to the tax on the basis of it being a single source tax, and arguing that with record unemployment, all businesses are suffering the same way, I would object to that and remind you all that the bill that's proposed still leaves them with over 50 million of their tax liabilities that they don't have to pay. The mines will be fine. Nevadans will not if you do not take care of your constituents. And it is your duty and your responsibility to do so. I encourage you to do so, and I remind you that that is your sole purpose as legislatures, is to do what's right for Nevadans. Thank you. I cede my time.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 898, testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good morning, Senator Cannizzaro and members of the Senate. For the record, my name is Annette Magnus, and I'm the Executive Director of Battleborn Progress. And we are in full support of AB4. For the last few days, multitudes of Nevadans from all over this state have been begging you to find additional revenue so that working Nevadans and families aren't the ones bearing the brunt of the budget cuts that are being made by you. This is a great first step. Assemblywoman Peggy Pierce was a fierce advocate for justice and was one of the women that I have always looked up to most in this body. And introducing a bill based on her language is a bold step And we expect to see legislation like that from all of our elected officials. It's absolute nonsense to hear members of this legislature say they didn't know a bill like this was coming. People have been calling into both chambers for 9 days talking about this. Nevadans have been asking for this for decades. It's time for the legislature to do the right thing for our kids and our families and get this bill to the governor's desk. As a native Nevadan, I have seen cut after cut, but never a real attempt to raise revenue. We have heard the testimony from crying mothers who are struggling, educators literally begging you for help, doctors and healthcare professionals worried about the health and well-being of our entire state, all of them telling you exactly how they will suffer if you do not find the revenue to fill this shortfall. While many industries are struggling in the midst of this pandemic, mining companies are not. They have not felt the economic hardships that we have in our state, and they must do right by those suffering in Nevada. We ask every member of this body to come together tonight and vote yes on AB 4. This is a nonpartisan issue. This bill will start to give Nevadans the much-needed relief we need during these difficult times. Do the right thing tonight for Assemblywoman Pierce and all of the hardworking Nevadans in this state. Mining must pay for what they extract from our state, on our land. We should not have to beg the people we elect to do the right thing. Nevadans are watching you right now, even at 1 a.m. There is no excuse, and we will hold you accountable if you vote wrong tonight. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits. 893, testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Hi, my name is Bailey Watkins, BAILEYWATKINS, and I am in favor of the bill as someone who has gone through the Nevada education system for my whole life and also worked in it. Thank you for your yes vote on this bill and making sure that we are funding the things that are important to Nevada and maintaining a strong community. Specifically, I'm very passionate about education. Knowing, unfortunately, the failings of our education system, I'm so sorry. But yes, we need to be. Oh goodness, please tax the mines. Please, you all know that we need more revenue. We all know it. Our kids cannot afford to have any more money taken from their education, our healthcare, mental health care, anything. We cannot afford to take money from any of these crucial community resources. So please vote yes on this bill. Thank you.
Caller with the last.
Hi, my name is. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Hello, my name is Elena de la Paz, ELENA de la Paz, DELAPAZ. A couple of things I just wanted to say that about considering taxing mines is not enough. We need to go all the way through with this because education and healthcare should not be the first on the chopping block. We should not be the scapegoats during a global crisis. This is ineffective and only shows that this legislature does not care about its people. And if you do care about us, you would think about this and go all the way through. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 906, testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Hi, my name is Olivia Piccarelli Platt. That is OLIVIA PICCIRILLI-PLATT. I have gone through the Nevada Public School Education, and I now work in Nevada Public School Education. And I think that especially if we are going to be asked to go back to school in the fall and put ourselves at risk, we should be funded more, and the future of the children that are also being put at risk need to be funded more. We need to tax those mines who come through and cause huge environmental destruction and do not
really do that much for the communities that they go in and bleed dry. So we need to tax them. And yeah, that's about it. Sorry, it's really late. Thank you.
If you are in favor of the bill, please press star 9 now to raise your hand, and we will take your call. Caller with the last 3 digits, 293, testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You may begin.
My name is Brian Frost, B-R-I-A-N-F-R-O-S-T. Good morning. I urge you to support AB 4. For 150 years, mining has received special treatment relative to other industries in the state. It's long past time that mining begins to pay their fair share. When we're cutting K-12 and higher education, including the most recent suggestion to take an additional $25 million from higher ed, it's way past time for a bill like AB 4. There's been a decade of notice for a bill like this. Please support AB 4 and help our state move forward. Thank you all for your time and work for our state.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 763, testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Hi, thank you all. My name is Arturo Gonzalez, spelled A-R-T-U-R-O, Gonzalez, G-O-N-Z-A-L-E-S. I am calling on behalf of myself and my family, my sister and my mother in particular, who are now unemployed due to the pandemic. I have to say that it's quite ironic that this call happened. I literally just spent the last hour and a half talking to my sister about putting together her resume and working with her about putting together her resume to attempt to look for work during this time. And now there's an opportunity here to give relief to Nevadans. And I urge the entire body to support AB 4, as our family would definitely benefit from that, as well as hundreds of thousands of other Nevadans. As an individual who went to school with buildings that were not that we could not enter because the school could not afford to complete construction for my entire time there, I would say that it's about time that we spend resources investing into the communities and the public schools and all of these other social offerings, and take from the places that can afford to give. I definitely encourage everybody to encourage AB 4. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 831, testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good morning, Madam Chair, the members of the Senate. My name is Cecia Alvarado, C-E-C-I-A-A-L-V-A-R-A-D-O. I am the Nevada State Director for Mi Familia Vota, and I'm calling in strong support of this bill and in support of all of those groups that have been working for decades on holding and making sure the mines are paying their fair share. Just think about our state ranks 45 in education and 31 in healthcare. Think about the devastating effect in the lives of working families. They're counting on you. Most families are right now because they are thinking on how they're going to put food on the table. They're counting on you to advocate for them. So I ask you to please support this bill, support education, support working families. Thank you.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 181, testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good morning. I'm Lalo Montoya, L-A-L-O-M-O-N-T-O-Y-A, Political Director at Make Aurora, Nevada. We are in support of AB 4. Our organization is made up of thousands of vibrant and beautiful working families who desperately need decisive action that will offer them dignity, and the ability to care for themselves and their families. It is time for mining to pay its fair share. Right now, when other corporations along with workers are putting everything on the line to help our state pull through this crisis, it is time for the mining industry to get in the fight to save our state by pulling their weight and to put an end to the tax deductions the legislature has approved over the years. We urge you to vote yes on AB 4. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 359, testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good evening. My name is Catherine Lorenzo, KATHERINELORENZO. I am here as a community member, and you just heard from my husband, Arturo Gonzalez. So I'm not going to repeat what he just said. I am just calling in support of AB 4. Our family, as you heard, is really facing financial hardship. So I ask that you please tax the mines. Our state is in dire need of financial resources. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 433, testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Thank you, Senator Canizaro and members of the Senate. For the record, my name is Amber Falgout, AMBERFALGOUT. I was born and raised in Reno, and I am a very concerned citizen and, more importantly, a mother. My daughter is heading into 7th grade. She has faced countless struggles learning to read, and at one point, while I was a single mother, working low-wage jobs with a college education, I had to break down and put her in outside tutoring so she could have one-on-one support. I would not have had to do this if our schools were funded properly. I urge you to pass AB 4. It is a start to fixing our broken revenue system. Please stop balancing the budget on the backs of our children and families. We cannot take it anymore. I thank you for your hard work, and I am encouraged by AB 4 because I feel it signals a turning point for our state. Maybe we can get to a point where our children are more important than corporations and industries like mining. Thank you for your time.
Caller with the last three digits, 182, testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good morning. My name is Ingrid Lopez, INGRIDLOPEZ for the record. We have a huge income inequality gap in Nevada, and it is because for so long, Nevada's lawmakers have ignored the working class. When our economy suffers, the working class is thrown under the bus time and time again. All of you ask for our votes to win re-election. Therefore, I ask you that you think of all the individuals that are struggling to put food on their table right now, our elderly, our vulnerable, that are scared of going back to work because they don't want to die. I urge you to vote yes on AB 4 and create revenue for Nevadans, the folks that elect you. Again, please, I urge you to vote yes on AB 4. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 456, testifying in favor of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
I'm in opposition to 4. My mistake.
Okay, thank you. 1 moment. Caller with the last three digits, 401. Testifying in favor of the bill, please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Tamika Henry. That's Tameka. Henry, Henry. I am calling in support of AB 4. We cannot continue to balance our budgets on the backs of children and education. And so I am totally in support of AB 4. I hope that you all will support it as well. because us working Nevadans, we need the additional revenue to our state. Thank you.
Madam Chair, the public comment line for those in favor of the bill is now empty.
Great, thank you so much. We will move for those in opposition.
If you are against the bill, please press star 9 now to raise your hand, and we will take callers in order. Caller with the last 3 digits, 124, testifying in opposition of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good morning, Paul Moradkin, Moradkhan, the Senior Vice President for the Vegas Chamber. The Vegas Chamber has several concerns with AB4 and cannot support this bill. As each of you know, COVID-19 has decimated Nevada's employers, both large and small. It does not matter if you're in Las Vegas, Reno, Elko. Employers and employees are hurting because of this pandemic. We have seen many businesses close, and they won't be reopening. And we see states around Nevada are closing again because of COVID-19 and greatly impacting their business communities. The U.S. Chamber has estimated 24% of businesses will not survive this pandemic crisis. The impact has been both devastating to both employers and employees. And this is a specific industry tax, and we've seen several times in the last few decades that relying on specific industry sectors makes our tax base more vulnerable and less diverse. The Chamber, as many of you know, has taken a long-standing position to oppose industry-specific taxation. This is a tax increase, and we would urge you not to pass this in an economic crisis and one that we do not know when it will end. We do believe that if this bill is passed, good-paying jobs in the industry will be lost, and that will directly impact Nevada's families and those communities that rely on these jobs. Sensible taxation should be broad-based. Industry-specific taxation leads to volatility and uncertainty. We at the Vegas Chamber support important services such as education and healthcare, but doing so without careful and thoughtful analysis will leave our community without a stable base for those services. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 969, testifying in opposition of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
My name is Brian Wachter, BryanWachter. I'm the Senior Vice President at the Retail Association of Nevada, and we are in strong opposition to AB4. We've heard in testimony tonight that everyone would like the Senate to do the right thing. But in this particular case, we believe that the right thing would be a comprehensive plan that allows Nevada to meet its needs going forward. There are many flaws in our current tax system that, if corrected, would set Nevada and its political subdivisions on a path to fiscal solvency. During the 19th session, there was not a comprehensive discussion on taxes at a time where we found ourselves at the height of the business cycle with low unemployment and positive economic growth. Instead, Nevada business community was confronted with a constitutional crisis. It's unfortunate that during a time of great economic upheaval, a single industry is sought to balance its budget. Not once during this time has the retail industry been asked to discuss a revenue plan that could restore the very difficult cuts that this body has identified. Here we are again, a tax discussion in the dead of the night, designed not to be a comprehensive solution, but rather another stopgap measure, sure to not solve the actual challenges Nevada faces. Retail has seen tremendous changes in the supply issues over the last 120 days. And what we have found is that even the smallest actions have drastic consequences downstream. And we believe that going after a single industry in order to put back not all of these cuts, but even some of them, isn't going to provide the economic solution you're looking for, and instead will hurt the very communities that mining is able to support. And we would urge this body to take some time to think about a solution that doesn't attack one single industry. And we stand in opposition to AB4 and urge you to do the same.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 510, testifying in opposition of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Hi, my name is Lilith Barron, Lilithbaran. I am actually for the bill and did not get let in for opposition. I think that it is criminal that we are calling at 1:30 in the morning to argue for our schools and funding for proper education. I'm a school teacher and mother, as well as a union member and musician. I understand that economic impact has affected every single person, as well as retail industries. However, I have third graders and fifth graders who can barely read, and it is criminal. While we do not tax minds that are constantly completely raping our beautiful sierras and our beautiful nature areas, while our children are sitting in classrooms without pencils, without books, without instruments, without paint, without anything that they need to be productive citizens in our state. We are top 10 in funding policing and things like mining, and bottom 10 in funding things like education, and it's disgusting. And we will only reap what we sow in these situations and continue to see a huge wealth gap and disparity in our state. We will continue to be the laughingstock of our country and be 47th in education and 50th in mental health. And I think that every single one of you should be ashamed of yourself for allowing us to get to this point as it is after 150 years of the strongest lobby in mining. I think that it's absolutely disgusting, and I do not know how you sleep at night. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 456, testifying in opposition of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Ann Silver, ANNSILVER. The Reno Sparks Chamber of Commerce has a long tradition of opposing any tax that singles out a specific industry. This is not the time to put a burden on one industry when our entire economy is facing the impact of this pandemic together. The Reno Sparks Chamber proposes instead a lowering of the sales tax to stimulate spending by private citizens who would appreciate greater opportunities to purchase larger ticket items such as appliances and vehicles at lower prices. Driving our economy forward is a responsibility to be shared by all of us and not be borne by singling out mining or any other designated business segment. We therefore oppose AB 4. You are working long hours to make very tough decisions, but our chamber asks that you not go down the path of singling out one industry and doing what can be accomplished instead by consumers. Thank you.
Caller with the last three digits, 176, testifying in opposition of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Good morning. This is Tyree Gray, Tyree Gray, President of the Nevada Mining Association, an association comprised of over 550 members representing every link in the mining supply chain. Though I've been on the job for just over 4 months, I am not new to the process, and I am a known entity to all of you there in the Senate chamber. At 3:16 p.m., I received a call about Assembly Bill 4. At nor the time leading up to the special session, nor during the special session, has my phone rang to discuss the concepts contained within this bill. Mining is one of Nevada's foundational industries with companies of all sizes, and I honestly still do not know how this will impact all my members, especially some of the small ones, except to say in a bad way. It bears mentioning that we are discussing an industry-specific tax. The revenue projections discussed in this bill ignore the simple fact that mining pays every single tax that every other business pays, plus this industry-specific tax, the net proceeds. Not once, not twice, but every time the state has called upon mining to prepay or discuss tax policy, the industry has been at the table. This time was no different. Yet it was not until 3 p.m. yesterday that my phone rang. Mining is happy to be part of the solution, but it cannot be the solution. Single industry tax is not the way to address the budget shortfall. As such, the Nevada mining industry is opposed to AB 4.
Caller with the last three digits, 635, testifying in opposition of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Senate. My name is Jenny Sartin, Jennysartin. I am the CEO for the Pahrump Valley Chamber of Commerce in Nye County. While we all recognize that the effects of COVID-19 have left no person or industry untouched, and I can appreciate the need of the state to address its budget deficit, I have serious concerns about AB 4 and the way it is written. I would like to point out that I would like to point out the disposition of a portion of the funds to the general fund is an area of great concern, and I do not support the efforts to single out any one particular industry. And while I certainly can recognize the need for an equitable tax structure, I cannot support AB 4 as written, and respectfully ask that you and the members of the Senate reconsider these actions. Thank you for your time.
For those testifying in opposition of the bill, please press star 9 now to raise your hand, and we will take callers in order. Madam Chair, the public comment line for those in opposition of the bill is now empty.
Great. Thank you so much for taking us through that public comment. We really appreciate it. At this point in time, we will go ahead and close the hearing. Oh, I'm sorry, neutral testimony. I apologize. I completely forgot, and I did this the other day too. I completely forgot about that. We will move to any testimony in the neutral position. If there is anybody wishing to give testimony in the neutral position before we close the hearing on Assembly Bill 4, please go ahead.
For those testifying in neutral of the bill, please press star 9 now to raise your hand, and we will take callers in order. Caller with the last 3 digits, 222, testifying in neutral of the bill. Please slowly pronounce, spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
My name is Sarah Adler, Sarahadler. I apologize, Madam Chair. I've been in the queue for hours, but was invisible until this moment. I would like to testify in favor. So, good morning. And on behalf of, thank you. On behalf of the Charter School Association of Nevada and of Advocates for Public Charter School Options, I appreciate this opportunity to testify in favor of AB 4. Mining is undoubtedly an industry that is greatly beneficial to our state and has a proud history here. Certainly, there are reasons to carefully consider whether you legislators support this bill. The public charter school sector says props to the mining industry for being willing to step up for the prepayment. Yet we further believe that AB 4 is essential because the need for revenue to safely educate Nevada's school children during this pandemic crisis is overwhelming, and SB 3 alone would not be enough. Further, there's a great need for revenue for public education on an ongoing basis. All the determination and grit we rightfully pride ourselves on in Nevada will not, on its own, make public education happen. It needs the funds that AB 4 will provide. Thank you.
For those testifying in neutral of the bill, please press star 9 now to raise your hand, and we will take callers in order. Caller with the last 3 digits, 415, testifying in neutral of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes. You may begin. Caller with the last 3 digits, 415, testifying in neutral of the bill. You may begin.
Hi, my name is Aria Flores. For the record, ARIAFLORES. I am actually for AB4 technology issues, but I do have my full intention to use my 2 minutes to be heard to the full intent. Being born and raised in Nevada, I have grown to love my state to the core. This is my first year where I got to cast my vote in my very first primary, and you bet I will be voting for the general as well. I am in full support of AB4 because we need this revenue in order to continue being quote-unquote big and strong. Us Nevadans who are struggling during this pandemic and these uncertain times need this revenue in order for us to invest in the future education of the next generation of Nevadans. I believe in our education system, and I have seen all of our teachers, and I have gone through this education system, and the biggest thing that everyone always talks about is funding and making sure that our future as fellow Nevadans is safe and continues on. I am again for AB4, and thank you for your time and hearing me out at 1:47 in the morning.
Caller with the last 3 digits, 142, testifying in neutral of the bill. Please slowly pronounce and spell your first and last name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, I'm actually also in favor of the bill. Name is Kaylee Barnett, KAILEYBARNETT. I just hopped on the call. I apologize. Like I said, I am in favor for AB4. I insist that mines pay their fair share and the budget shortfalls from COVID-19 don't fall on the backs of working families and children in our education system. I am a teacher, and Nevada has ranked very low in education for many years. I'm a product of Clark County's education system and Washoe County's education system. We need to be funding schools more, and COVID-19 has put Nevada in a fiscal crisis, and mining needs to contribute to that. And according to the Nevada Current, nearly half of Nevada's gold mines has not paid any mining taxes since 2016, and I believe they need to pay their fair share, and it shouldn't be put on working families. And that's all. Thank you.
Madam Chair, the public comment line for those in neutral is now empty.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We will now close the hearing on Assembly Bill number 4, having heard the neutral testimony. And again, thank you for your time and patience as we move through the public comment. We really appreciate it, and thank you for keeping me on track. I appreciate that very much. We will close the hearing on Assembly Bill number 4. At this period of time, that will conclude the presentation on Assembly Bill number 4. And I would accept any motion from the committee. Senator Harris, a motion to move to pass. Is there a second? Second from Senator Scheibel. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing no discussion on the motion, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. Assembly Bill number 4 will pass out of the Senate Committee of the Whole and to the floor of the Senate. At this point in time, that does conclude our business of the agenda for the Committee of the Whole. And so, Senator Woodhouse.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the Senate Committee of the Whole do rise and report to the Senate.
Senator Parks.
I second that motion.
You've heard the motion. Any remarks? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. The Senate Committee of the Whole is dissolved, and the Senate will be in a brief recess.
The Senate will come to order. I guess it's July 17th, guys. So good morning. Order business number 4, reports of committees.
Madam President, your committee of the whole, to which was referred to Senate Bill number 4, has had the same under consideration. Begs the report and back the recommendation do pass. Signed, Senator Nicole Canizaro, Chair. End of reports.
Thank you. Order business number 13, general file.
Assembly Bill number 4, introduced by Assembly Committee of the Whole, revises formula for determining the tax on the net proceeds of minerals extracted. The people of the state of Nevada, represented in the Senate and Assembly, do enact as follows: Section 1 to Section 1.
Thank you. Are there any amendments to the bill?
There are none. Section 6, this act becomes effective upon passage and approval. End of bill.
Thank you. Remarks from the floor. Senator Orenshaw.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Madam President, I rise in support of Assembly Bill 4, and I urge this body to support it and to vote in the affirmative. Assembly Bill 4 has tremendous potential to help our constituents who need it so desperately during these unprecedented times. When we concluded the general session last year, I don't think any of us expected a global pandemic to hit our state, our nation, and our country. I don't think any of us expected to see tourism suffer the way it has, and to see all the vital services that our constituents rely on suffer so greatly. Assembly Bill 4 has the potential to help our constituents, to help our school children, to help everyone who benefits from health and human services, everything that we've discussed these last 9 days. This has been a difficult time. We've asked industry to come together and to see what can be done to help. This bill means a lot to me because I served during the 2011 session, and my colleague, my friend, the late Assemblywoman Peggy Pierce, did sponsor a very similar bill, Assembly Bill 428. She was passionate about trying to help our constituents, about trying to see what could be done to further the goals of public education, the health and human services goals. And this bill is a great testament to what Peggy fought for and will help our constituents. I urge its passage.
Thank you, Senator Orenshaw. Senator Settlemeyer.
Thank you, Madam President. I appreciate you calling on me at this early or late hour. I don't know which way to say it at this point in time. This bill began in the Assembly at 7 o'clock yesterday, p.m. Here we are at 2 a.m., day 9/10, in a situation where the general public can't be in the building. We have members actually voting from Clark County on a divisive issue. I'm bothered by this bill. Within our Constitution, we talk about just evaluation. This bill seeks to jack the value up on something to get more money. It's akin to selling a car to somebody for $10,000. They drive from San Francisco to get the car at your house here in Nevada, and you sell it to them. Then we're going to go back now retroactively and say, oh, you have to pay for that car to be transported to San Francisco and get the money from them. That seems rather improper to me. And on industry-specific tax, who's next? We heard plenty of testimony. This is the first step. And I feel perplexed because my family's had a long history of fighting mining. We had a lawsuit, went 58 years against the mining industry. Started out farmers versus miners on a water war called the Alpine Decree. And I was here in 2015. And I voted to take away deductions for mining. And I have no problem looking at those deductions again. But wholesale, just take a percentage away from them on something that they have not looked at and have actually started businesses or new mines out based on the rule that it was, it's not fair. It's not right, especially in the middle of a pandemic. No state in the union has raised taxes during this pandemic. Well, so far, all while wearing a mask. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Settlemeyer. Senator Pickard.
Thank you, Madam President. I came in here at 11:30 and saw this bill for the first time. I'm not an expert in mining taxes by any stretch, but I was able to make some observations. First, I think it was pretty obvious when Mr. Ginden went through and presented the bill and the exhibit that went with it, that it is anything but a simple process. I don't know how anyone who doesn't live this every day could possibly pretend to understand it. The bill in its intended or in its current form appears not to have been provided to industry or even adequate notice for them. You can't review a bill until you read it. This bill is going to double the tax on mines, and they have to pay retroactively where the mines had ultimately no understanding of what they would have to do financially. So whatever decisions they've made are moot at this point. They're out the window. Now they're going to have to set aside twice the actual tax, or at least the differential, in order to be able to pay it. And they had no notice. Now, I did vote yes out of committee. I think that we need to do more, particularly for education. But I'm really concerned about the legal analysis of this. The bill clearly, as it was articulated, is not based, the cap is not based on any rational basis. They could not at least articulate why they set the rate. That's a problem to me. Mining is, I will acknowledge, by constitutional fiat, a different beast. And so it's already treated differently. I have no problem with that. But what concerns me the most is that so many people believe that this bill, this tax, is going to be a boon to education. And in doing some back-of-the-napkin math, it appears that we're talking about somewhere between 10 and 15 million to education. The rest goes to the general fund. I could be wrong on that, but I think it's probably order of magnitude. So there is no assurance in the bill, as confirmed by legal, that this money is earmarked or destined to education, which means that much of the testimony we heard from those suggesting this is a boon to education have been misinformed. I don't know if that's a mistake, if that's the lateness of the hour. I don't know why. But I certainly felt that by the end of the testimony, they thought this was to help education. And yet there is nothing in the bill except for the property tax piece, and then only 2/3 of it that goes outside of the county in which it's raised. So there is no assurance from the language of the bill that this puts money into education. I would have been a strong yes if this were going to education, but it is not. It is going to fund other things. And if history is any indication, as they say, past is prologue, we watched this body strip money out of, permanent funding money out of education and replaced with one-shots. I have no reason to believe that this effort is going to be any different. So while I voted this out of committee, because it is a complex beast, there is no way for us to know what's really going to be done with the money. No one has said what is going to be done with this money. And because it is so complex and we've had so little time to really digest it, I cannot comfortably vote for passage of this bill. So I urge my colleagues to push the pause button. Let's revisit this in the upcoming session. We're only 6 months away. Let's look at this when we have time to actually consider all of the points. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Pickard. Senator Hardy.
Thank you, Madam President. I was busy looking for my pause button and I couldn't find it. This is about policies, procedures, and people. I quite frankly am very grateful for the leadership recognizing that this is indeed an increase in taxes and thus requires a 2/3 vote for approval. People can understand that we have differences of opinion on policies. They like it when we agree with them, and they don't like it when we disagree with them. They really do not like it when we use procedures to limit access to the process of having input. When we do it in the dark, behind closed doors, without time to be involved and make it problematic to have an influence, they don't like that. My colleague from District 19 made an apropos observation about it. In the West, when wearing a mask at night demanding money, it just doesn't look right. The mining industry is at risk for this bill, and other industries may feel appropriately nervous about what is going to happen to them next year. An alternative budget was actually presented that did not require a new state revenue creation, but used other sources and adjustments to even give teachers willing to be in the classroom a well-deserved raise. In the presentation and the testimony tonight, we have heard this will cause a rate increase for some. We have not heard how this money will be tied to a specific budget item. We have not heard a specific plan to use the money, only that we need more. We have not heard how much actually will go to the schools in Clark County, only that some will go to the schools. We have heard that we don't know the effects without input from those affected in the wee hours of this night. We were reminded that there is a differentiation of tax rate caps based on a quasi way to decide the worth of the ore. We heard a simple sentence from our well-qualified tax expert, quote, "I do not have that information available tonight," unquote, regarding the 5% rate. It's, in short, this is a sad way to process a policy that is both complicated and consequential. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Hardy. Senator Gokachia.
Thank you, Madam President. And at this late hour, I'll be brief. I usually not given to long speeches anyway. It's no secret that I am an advocate for rural Nevada. And looking around the room, I'm probably the only one that's ever in this room that's been employed as a miner, at least sitting in the body. I'm not going to speak to the Sergeant at Arms here. And it is true that AB4 will increase local revenues. However, I believe that will be for the short term. Some of the smaller projects will be stopped. There is no way. Mines are very capital intensive. It takes 2 to 3 years to develop a mine before you ever pull an ounce of product out. And I'm really not sure how that's going to work. You can't carry it with you. I look around the room and I'm going to ask you, how many of you file a long form 1040A, your income tax? And then how many of you are prepared to write off 40% of your legitimate deductions? I'm not seeing a lot of nods. I know I don't want to do it, and there's not any difference from what we're asking the mining companies in this state to do. It's actually against the IRS code. I don't believe you can do it. It's just not fair. It's not right. Here we are at 2 o'clock in the morning on a bill that started some 10 hours ago. I commit to you, bring this back to the regular session where it belongs. An open session where we can have input. Net proceeds is a heavy lift. I've been dealing with it since the early 90s when I was serving as a county commissioner. It's hard to get it right. I'm not going to say we've got it right, but I commit to you, I will work on it. But let's vet it first. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Gokachia. All right, are there any further remarks? Senator Cannizzaro.
Thank you, Madam President. I think that while I can appreciate that it is late, and I'm sure everyone is tired. And while I can appreciate that this entire last week has been full of difficult decisions that can feel very impossible, and I think I have said that several times, I also think that what is impossible in all of this is to sit here and listen to the idea that we are facing an economic downturn. And again, we are talking about how it is that we are going to have to cut education and healthcare in the state of Nevada in order to balance a budget. Now, I recognize that what has been proposed in this bill is not going to fill a $1.2 billion shortfall in the state revenue. But neither is scraping the bottom of accounts to find additional monies to save some critical programs. And so the prospect that somehow, if that is the exercise we engage in, that should be good enough is just a false sense of hope. I think that one of the interesting things is there have been some comments made that if it were earmarked specifically for education, that there would be a vote. Or if the process had been just given a bit more time. Or if we had a second to look at this, that perhaps the decision would be different. But I find myself in the situation of sitting at this point before this body and saying yet again that we are trying to put a value-based decision in some of the things that we are discussing and say that things like education are important in the state of Nevada. And so where it is that we can continue to put that at the forefront of our discussions, and at the end of the last legislative session, there was a bill that was earmarked for education, specifically. But at that point in time, I think it was that we didn't need more money because it was enough, and we didn't need to have that conversation because of process, and we didn't need to talk about it, and here we are talking about cutting education. And there is no easy answer to that. There is not $1.2 billion hiding in the Nevada budget to fill that hole. And yes, we cannot say that in the future a legislature would use revenue funds from this particular bill to fund education. But that is the same thing that we do in every single bill that passes out of this legislature. You cannot bind the hands of a future legislature. But what we could do is make a decision to say that we can take revenue and make a decision to put it to education. That's what this body can do. And at some point, that has to matter enough that we're not making excuses about, well, if this particular bill was earmarked specifically for education, then it wouldn't be a problem. But because there's not a specific sentence in the bill that says it goes to education, we can't make that decision. We can make a subsequent decision to say this money should go to education. That should not be hard. What should be hard is listening to testimony from real people who rely on the public education system to educate their kids, who rely on services here in the state of Nevada to make sure that they can get proper health care, who are trying to do just their best to work an honest living and live day to day. That should be hard. This shouldn't be hard. At some point, there has to be a compelling reason for all of us to vote for Nevadans, the people we represent. And if a global pandemic has not illustrated that light and shown it in the most apparent way upon us, despite the fact that we are in an empty chamber without members of the public sitting in the rows above us, and without folks standing out in the hallway and separated by our colleagues with plexiglass and masks, then I don't know what else is going to shine a light broadly on this and say that this has to at some point matter. And it has to matter enough to have the conversation, and it has to matter enough to be able to say this is something we want to do. The conversation about whether this is arbitrary or not arbitrary, well, 5% in the Constitution is likely an arbitrary number because I can't find a specific piece of validation for that. And so if this is an arbitrary number and it should be higher, well, that conversation could have happened. But instead it's, oh, well, it's arbitrary. And that just feels like another reason, another justification to not make the decision. And the idea that this is being brought late, that has happened in this body at all hours of the night at the end of legislative sessions, including a decision to talk about taking money out of public education 3 minutes before the end of a legislative session. This bill has not been just 3 minutes introduced or process evaded. Yes, we are short on time, but we are also trying to close a budget, and this has been a topic of conversation that we have heard, and I think every public comment that we've had for the last 9 days by my count. The hole in the budget has been a topic of conversation for at least the last month, and ways in which to address that problem have had to be at the forefront of everyone sitting in this body's mind, or I'm not really sure what we're doing here. So the idea that somehow this is just such a shock and we just can't address it is not a compelling reason for me. There are lots of other states and cities, I was actually just looking at this, that have talked about different taxes, and that is not a compelling argument to look the other way in this situation. There's some money in this bill that would specifically go to schools, and the rest of it, we can make that decision and make that priority. And that should be a compelling reason enough. For me, the testimony is a compelling reason enough. And a lot of the reason why that is because I sit in this body as the daughter of a bartender and a waitress who are just trying to make it by every single day. And the one thing they told me was, if you go to school and you work hard, you will have opportunities to do whatever it is you want to do. And without the public education in the great state of Nevada, which I am a proud graduate of, and the first person in my immediate family to graduate from high school, let alone college here in Nevada and law school here in Nevada, and to sit in this body, this matters to me, and it is a compelling reason to say that this is something that we should do. And it's not going to solve the entire problem. I think we have to continue to have conversations about priorities and values and how we fix this. But if this is not the compelling situation, if this is not the problem we face that is of such a magnitude that we say, yes, this is something that we are going to value, then I just don't know what is. And if this is not an answer to the problem, I welcome that conversation, but I think that this is a way that we can say, yes, we want to make fewer cuts to education, and we can make that decision. I urge my colleagues to vote yes for this bill as one of the many solutions that we have before us to address an incredible problem. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Cannizzaro. Senator Hammond.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm going to be really brief because a lot of my colleagues have already hit upon some of the points I would make. I know we just heard an impassioned plea for and on behalf of the bill. But I'll say this. I'm going to go back to a comment that was made by one of the callers who called in favor of the bill, asking us to think about what we were doing and how we could respond to small businesses. And I think that my thoughts wrap around that particular question because it stuck in my mind. I've been sort of dwelling on it ever since. A lot of the discussion that we've had tonight and things that I've been talking to my colleagues and others about since about 7 o'clock yesterday night really centered around the process. I've been here long enough to know that there is a certain process, and yes, there are times when things have moved faster than we tend to like. They move faster than we sometimes can keep up with. But I've never seen something like this. I know that, yes, we have been talking about this idea. People have been bringing it up in conversations. They've been bringing it up during questions and in comment sections when they talk about the need to tax more in the area of mining. So, yes, we've had that discussion. But as everybody knows, you really don't know what the discussion centers around until you have language. The language was not presented to us until late. So to those small businesses who would ask what I have done, I would remind them that I am not about to start taxing or changing tax policy in the middle of the night. Not on mining, and certainly I won't do it to you in the future. There is a time to do this. I was here in 2013 when a group of us brought up the idea of taxing mining. And we categorized some of the funding. We directed the funding to education. We had a specific purpose for why we were asking more money from gold mines and how it was going to impact education specifically. Some of you who are here in this room right now on the floor were here during that legislative session, and we heard nothing in the way of discussion after that proposal was made. Crickets. And we brought it early enough in this that particular legislative session to give everybody a chance to talk about it and go forward. I've also been in here in a couple of different sessions where tax and tax policy was brought very late with no time to really discuss. This is not easy stuff right here. And to just spring it on everybody and the language be brought at the last second really, I think, subverts the whole idea of a process where things are discussed as we have been doing since the beginning of this session when it was brought. I know several of my colleagues on both the right and left of the political spectrum have been talking and have been in discussions about where money is located, how we can get more money, and where that should, and when we do collect the money, where the add back should be. And we've had that discussion. We've released our ideas, and they're out there in the public for everybody to kind of see what we value, what add backs we want to put back out there, and there is money out there. I think that this is a time for us to really talk about this in the next session. The way I understand the bill also, the original bill, is that money wouldn't be even collected until after the next year. So it really wouldn't help us to fill the budget hole that we have right here. So what we're asking for all those people who were calling in earlier and were wondering what's going on, the language, it doesn't lie. It doesn't go specifically to education. It's not really designed to fill a hole right now. And it really is, in my opinion, more political than anything else. It's to kind of see where we are with this. And I truly can't support anything like this. And then I'll tell you, education, you're absolutely right when people are talking about education. This last quarter of the year, many families saw their children at home on computers trying to help them with their education while they were working at home and seeing that their children were not progressing. Not by any fault of educators, but by circumstance. And yet, those parents had no alternative. They were given no alternative. And now that prospect of trying to find a way to educate their children this fall is pretty dismal. Many of them are looking at their students staying at home again. And they would love the opportunity to find a different way to educate their children if they don't have confidence in the public education system and delivering that education. I personally am not in favor of adding any new taxes to our state unless we have more choice for parents. We need them to be able to have a hand in the education of their child, and especially in circumstances like we have seen this past spring and potentially in the fall, to give more parents more opportunities to make sure their child receives an education. That's where I stand right now. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Hammond. All right then. I don't see any further remarks. Okay. Hearing none, the secretary will open the roll.
Senator Spearman, do you vote yes or no on Assembly Bill number 4?
I vote yes.
All right. Looks like everyone's voted. Does anyone wish to change his or her vote? Well, doesn't look like it. Okay. So the secretary will close the roll. The vote on Assembly Bill 4 is 13 in favor, 8 against. The bill has failed to receive a 2/3 majority. Assembly Bill 4 is declared lost.
That concludes order of business number 13 and business of the desk at this time.
Thank you. Order of business number 16, remarks from the floor. Senator Cannizzaro?
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the Senate stand in adjournment until the hour of noon on Saturday, July 18th, 2020.
All right, you have heard the motion. June 18th, Saturday. July 18th, Saturday. Actually, guys, it's only one day away. All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? Aye. All right, Pat Spearman, go to bed. Okay, looks like motion has passed. We are adjourned, people. Go to bed, drive safely, please. Thank you.
Senators, tomorrow's lunch and dinner program will be postponed and it will be carried over to Saturday.